Okay, we're looking at rounding and we're looking at upper and lower bounds again, and error intervals. But this time, the sophistication of how we're rounding is slightly more complicated, because I'm not rounding to tens, hundreds, thousands. I'm not rounding to any power of 10 necessarily. I'm rounding to significant figures, or possibly decimal places. So you have to think a little bit about it, a little bit more. Now then, 300 has been rounded to two significant figures. So there is a number at the bottom end that will round up to 300, and there's a number at the top end that will round down to 300 when I round to two significant figures. Looking at this, when I round to two significant figures, 1, 2, I'm looking at the tens place. And so if I'm rounding into tens, I'm going to be plus or minus 5, because remember it's 10 divided by 2. This sign means plus or minus. You've seen it when we did the quadratic formula. So an upper bound is 300 plus 5, which is 305. And a lower bound is 300 subtract 5, which is 295. Write down the error interval. It's the lower bound, which is 295. That's less than or equal to x, remembering that that is what I'm referring to when I say x. And that is less than 305, but it won't be ever 305. If I was doing a question like this, I'd want to convince myself that I was right, because it's a bit tricky. So if I try to round this to two significant figures, this 5 would tell me to take that 9 up, so I'll be going to 300. So that's super. And at the top end, two significant figures, anything lower than a 5 would take me to 300. Once I hit the 5, I'm going to 310. But that's okay, because I haven't included it in my bound. So that's worked. Pause the video, try your turn. Take your time, because it's not as easy as what you did yesterday. Press play, and I'll go through the answer. Okay, rounding 300. So the number 300 has been rounded to three significant figures. Now if I'm looking at three significant figures with this, 1, 2, 3 significant figures, so I'd be looking at the units, wouldn't I? Now the units, when you're rounding in the units, you're rounding plus or minus 0.5, because it's 1 divided by 2, 1 being a unit. So plus or minus 0.5. So for an upper bound, I'm going to say it's 300 plus 0.5, which is 300.5. And for a lower bound, I'm going to say that it's 300 minus 0.5, which is 299.5. The error interval is the lower bound at the bottom end, so 299.5. That's less than or equal to x. Again, remember that's just referring to the thing that you're rounding. And that's lower than 300.5. And again, convince yourself that you're right by saying three significant figures on this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, that would be the line. 5 would make that into 300. So I'm okay with that. Anything higher than 5, of course, is going to go to 300 as well. And then here, 1, 2, 3, well this 5 would take me up to 301, but I haven't included it. So anything below that 5, if it was 4, let's say, you would round it to 300, and so that's working nicely. Okay, so well done if you got that. I am going to do some more examples here. The number 7 has been rounded to one significant figure. Calculate the upper bound. Now then, one significant figure here, I'm looking at units. So it's going to be plus or minus 0.5. Because I said it, but I didn't write it. So I'm looking at units, because it's just the number 7. Okay. So an upper bound, 7 plus 0.5, which is 7.5. And a lower bound would be 7 minus 0.5, which would be 6.5. And now our error interval is the lower bound at the bottom end, 6.5. That's less than or equal to x, remembering that that's referring to the 7, which is less than 7.5. I will check one significant figure, that's my line. 5 takes that 6 to a 7, so good. Anything higher than that will clearly go to a 7. And here, well, that 5, that's taking that 7 to an 8. But I'm okay, because anything below that 5 will leave me on a 7. So that's absolutely fine. Lovely stuff. Okay, pause the video and have a go at this, which is 8 rounded to 2 significant figures. If you press play, I'll go through the answer. Okay, 8 rounding to 2 significant figures would actually be 8.0. So if I'm rounding it to 2 significant figures, I'm looking here in the tenths, which gives me plus or minus 0.05. It's the next one along. So for an upper bound, I've got 8 plus 0.05, which is 8.05. And for a lower bound, it's 8 subtract 0.05, which is 7.95. I'm going to write that as an error interval now, so it's the lower bound, 7.95, less than or equal to x, which is referring back to the 8, which is less than 8.05. I am going to check that to 2 significant figures. 1, 2, and in goes the line. That 5 tells me to take that 9 up, which moves that to being an 8. So that works. Anything more than that, 7.96, 7.97, clearly that's going to take us up. Check the upper bound. 1, 2 significant figures. This 5 would take that to 8.1, but I'm not including the 5. So anything smaller than a 5, 4, for example, would take me back down to 8, to 2 significant figures. Here we go, it would be 8.0. And so it's okay. The work that goes with this then is the second half of the sheet I sent you yesterday. So it's this part of the table. So if I was doing the first question, 400 to 1 significant figure, remember what we said, look at the place value. What is the place value? Is it tens, 100 units that you'd be rounding to? What are you adding or taking away? What's the lower bound? What's the upper bound? What's the error interval? Okay, now this place value thing, it's going to be different with every question. I know that they're slightly small, but I think you can read it. I can read it, and my eyes aren't great. Again, it's up to you. Either print it out and send me a photograph, or copy it out and send me a photograph. Either way, have a go and let me know if there's any problems.